Many years ago, when I first got my PS1, I didn't have that many games for it. It was my uncle's, and my grandmother just happened to find it in her basement with like two games and a controller. I remember the one was a Dracula point and click game, and I genuinely have no idea what the other one was. The PS1 was considered retro at the time, and the retro game market didn't explode on itself, so you could still get these games for really good prices at secondhand shops and thrift stores very easily. I was, of course, a teenager with very little money, so going into a thrift store and finding a bunch of PS1 demo discs was like amazing to me. And unfortunately, I was also stupid and sold a lot of this stuff before the market just happened to implode. One of these games that I managed to pick up for like 30 cents at a thrift store was Clock Tower 2: The Struggle Within. Loose, no cover, no manual, just the disc. The game was kind of jank with some really bad voice acting.
No! Oh no! Ashley! My amulet? No! Stop!
And some controls I didn't fully understand, but I was like 14 or whatever and I didn't care. I was just happy playing games on the PS1. I later on learned that Clock Tower 2 wasn't Clock Tower 2 at all. It's actually Clock Tower Ghost Head, a sort of side game in the series, although we had a weird localization for the English version. And that Clock Tower 1, which I didn't have, was the real Clock Tower 2. After that, the series just became something that I was aware of. I saw other videos on the games, so I played a bit of the original Clock Tower on PS1, and by that I mean Clock Tower 2, but I never played the original. I'm not sure why, maybe it was just nothing that struck me, but I figured it's finally time. The game officially releases in English next month. There's a Friday the 13th this month. I missed it, my bad. So it's really the perfect time to get a little spooky. I am playing the enhanced release on PS1, which means the game opens with an FMV sequence before the actual main menu, and it's pretty cool. I'm gonna get a creepy baby, and creepy babies are always good to have. Starting the game itself, we get an intro cutscene showing four girls and their teacher heading towards a big mansion. The reason being that the girls have gotten adopted by the owner of the mansion, a Mr. Burroughs. After reaching the mansion, the scene shifts to a gameplay scene where the teacher, Miss Mary, leaves to go find Mr. Burroughs. And from here, the game begins. It's a basic point and click interface where you move the pointer around and click on whichever object you want to interact with. If it's interactable, the cursor kind of locks in on it and becomes a square, so you can avoid any pixel hunting by just moving the mouse around and clicking on whatever it highlights. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. If the game just tells you what items can be clicked on, then what's the difficult part of the adventure? These games normally have hunting for items and solving puzzles as the majority of their gameplay. So what goes on with this? Well, some items can be found at different or multiple locations depending on your playthrough, and sometimes clicking on an item does literally nothing. Or you can spawn the main villain of the game, the Scissor Man. Scissor Man acts as your primary obstacle throughout the game, and he can appear in several ways, but the most common way will be from you clicking on something. And once he spawns, he will keep chasing you until you manage to hide from him in a designated hiding spot, of which there are several throughout the building. He seems to teleport, but that's just because he's not actually chasing you like Mr. X from the RE2 remake. It's more like he just spawns in the rooms and he'll go there until you manage to evade him. Sometimes he'll spawn right in front of you, even though he was behind you just a few moments ago. Don't think about it, he must have a tunnel beneath the floorboards or something. It's kind of fast how crazy he gets around. He's also smarter than what you would assume, as simply hiding from him is a puzzle in and of itself sometimes. As I mentioned previously, only certain places can be used as hiding spots, and some of them will require for you to do more than just simply clicking on them and hiding inside, as you'll either not be able to hide on it, or he'll find you anyways if all you do is go in. So, to recap, You'll want to click on a bunch of things because you want to pick up as many items as you can, but you also want to make sure you don't spawn the Scissor Man, because doing that might mess you up. You don't have a traditional health bar. You see, you can have a panic meter. This is a fusion between a regenerating health bar and a stamina meter. Running, witnessing something terrifying, or taking damage will cause the panic meter to go from blue, which is really good, to red, which is really bad. In the red, you can't defend yourself against anything. You're prone to tripping, and making any sort of escape can be very difficult if you're tripping. And since you can't defend yourself, if you get cornered, it's done. There's obviously a lot you need to keep track of. Run around, figure things out, avoid Scissor Man. But there's one other thing that we gotta add to this as well. Remember those friends that you arrived at the mansion with? Well, they can also die. And they very likely will die, but depending on how you play, they might die in different ways. From being drowned in a pool, thrown out of a window, maybe they got sacrificed in a cult ritual. You'll encounter different scenes depending on how you play. If you play your cards right, you might even be able to save one of them, but canonically, Jennifer's the only one that makes it, so don't worry about this too much. Except, maybe you should worry about it. The game has multiple endings, from an S rank to an H rank, and experimenting with the game to try and get all of these endings is part of the experience. Unfortunately, I also think this is where the game shows some of its weakness. It is a very short game, and if you only do one playthrough, you could potentially get a very bad playthrough. You could barely encounter Scissor Man, and there's a room in the game detailing a very important backstory lore on what happens. If you don't find that room and you barely encounter Scissor Man, you've essentially just got a very, very bare bones adventure game going on here. This is more likely than what you might think, and in fact, it was what happened to me on my first playthrough. Some events are randomized, and other events only occur if specific flags have or have not been triggered. Something like finding this room that details the backstory can be missed entirely by just having that room be empty by the time you meet it. Jennifer is only human, and some things will kill her instantly, like being shot, stabbed, or eaten alive. Yeah, you heard me right, you can be eaten alive by a guy in a cage. Some of these flags have no real way of being avoided if you don't already know what sets it off. Like, there's a room that has a key to another room inside. You technically won't need to go in there, but getting this key will give you access to another room that you would like to visit because it tells you what you need to progress. Now, this first room has a chance to be empty, which is great. Or it can have someone in it. And if they are in the room, depending on what information you already know, two things can play out. Either something can happen, which I'm not going to tell you about, or if you already know too much, they might try to kill you. A new player would need to go in that room to get the key necessary to enter the other room. But if you go in there and now next thing you know you're, dead, or worst case scenario is you go in there and now you can't get the good ending, I mean, sort of thing just happens. It's an interesting concept to be sure, taking an adventure game and using it to create a horror game, and there's some very strong points about the game in there. But at the same time, I can't bring myself to love it on the same level of something like Resident Evil. Maybe it's just because it didn't live up to the hype for me, hearing about how cool this game is and playing it after playing future horror games, especially ones with stalker villains like Mr. X or the alien from Alien Isolation. It just doesn't feel as strong. If there was a new entry in the series, I imagine Scissor Man might be like this in Xenomorph, or he might be like Mr. X or Jack Baker. There's a constant pursuing threat that you have to hide under tables and desks from. And I think that would be pretty cool. I also think the story is fine, but like I said, that requires you to find the story. It was a similar issue I had to Alone in the Dark, where most of the story was hidden in books that you could miss or not read for other reasons. I do look forward to playing the other games. I look forward to playing through Ghost Head again.
What is that?
and then just see how things are. I suppose you look forward to Clock Tower 3. I mean, I hear that's a weird one, and I mean, I love some weird entries in series before, but like I said, for pretty much a decade, I've been hearing about how good this game is, and I played it, and it just didn't live up to the hype for me. That's just my opinion on the matter here. If you like this video, be sure to let me know, and fun fact for you guys, I have a backlog where I leave reviews for everything that I've played recently, as I don't make videos for everything, nor do I record everything that I play. But I do like to leave my thoughts on things, so, head to my backlog. I do hope to continue doing these types of videos, and I hope that you guys like them. See you all on the next one.